Welcome to the Weekly Dive. I'm your host, Nate, and this is my show where I talk about things that I find interesting, usually related to music. And in this week, going into my song Trap Wonk. This is a little bit of a longer video again, like last week, so I'll try to keep this short. But I kind of go into sort of structuring how I layer some stuff, how I might mix things for different types of environments, and then some recommendations or things that I think other people should keep in mind when they're working on their projects. And without further ado, I'll send it off to Broadcast Nate. Well, thank you, Producer Nate. Well, like he said, we're going over my song Trap Wonk today. I really didn't have any other name for it. Most of the time it kind of just felt like it really just felt like a club song. You know what I mean? So I didn't want to call it like Play This in the Club because Joel's already has a really amazing song called that. But I kind of had a similar vibe where it's like, this is like kind of a fun song you might put on, but I don't necessarily see, I love listening to it around, but it's definitely one that is like designed to play in like a set environment. And not to like go in, I'm not like the biggest producer and like, oh, you can't do one or you can't do the other, but I definitely think there's like places where when I make songs, in my head, I see people listening to them. Like I have some songs that I work on with other artists that are more headphone listening, or like you're listening to when you're at home, or you're hanging out with your friends, which is different than playing in the club. Like you maybe could, but you wouldn't listen to Harry Styles in the club that often, right? So it's obviously that. For those that haven't heard it, go check it out, but I'll play a little bit of it right now. But what I'm going to kind of go into again with this one is a little bit of layering and just kind of how to make stuff feel good. And then that's pretty much it. So here's this song. I'm going to kind of do it from a little bit before the drop so you can hear the melody switch, and then kind of into the drop a little bit. Well, if you want to hear it without the CPU errors, then go check it out. But this one I did have a lot of fun with. I kind of started with some of these melodies here. It kind of just felt like a trap song, it just had like a really simple, nice kind of feeling melody. But I kind of wanted it not just to build, like I dropped it originally with that sound as like the drop, but I was like, this is kind of weak. Maybe it'd be cool for like just like a regular beat, but I really wanted to add another level, so that's why it has that bigger drop. Now the things I really wanted to focus on, which I feel like I did a pretty good job in one of the other videos, but I wanted to kind of give it another context, is kind of understanding what, as a producer, you should be doing to sort of make it listenable to someone who isn't a producer. And that may make sense to some people, but for those that doesn't make sense to, let me try to explain. So like, as a producer, right, you're used to all of the sounds, you're used to everything. If I listen to a song from one of my friends, I'm going to notice all the intricacies to everything because that's what my ears are used to hearing, right? I know certain frequencies, I know certain things, I know when stuff sounds bad, I know when stuff sounds good, at least, in my own opinion. But I think one thing a lot of producers forget is like how you need to make it for your average listener. I think Kashmir was talking in a podcast I was listening to. It wasn't the Willie Joy one, although his on that one is very good. It was a different one. I'm going to pull it up just so I can shout it out. Nope, not that song. It was on where is it? The EDM podcast. Great podcast, by the way. But he was talking about, why, he was thinking about like why it's weird, or originally he was working on sessions and there were people in the room, just kind of doing stuff in the back, like just hanging out, not really doing anything. Like he was even talking about how he had some issues with one of his friends because he was like, he felt like he was doing all the work or one of his friends is in the back. But in their conversation on the podcast, they were talking about how it's almost important to have someone like that in the room that's sort of your average listener, and not to make listeners seem dumb or anything, but I think it's important to notice that there are people that you want them to be enjoying it even if they don't understand the intricacies, or you want to make sure it's simple enough for anyone to notice it or to enjoy it, and they don't have to enjoy it just because it's so producer oriented, you know what I mean? So what I really wanted to do was create something that would be easy to listen to, easy to start with, and something that would work well for my sets that I could play. You know what I mean? And so I really wanted something that, and I made this for a club, right? I have a decent intro, a decent outro. It's pretty simple. And I would like to mention, this on its own is pretty cool. So let me mute this track that kind of is filling the background. Right, and you can hear some of those lower frequencies, but I wanted to add this so it created a little bit more of a space for it. Anyway, the point I really want to try to get to and make with this is that it's important to work on your idea and get it done, and then revise it and then re-edit things to make sure they feel good to a listener, right? Like I said in some of the other videos, right now, in my opinion, I believe that listeners really only pay attention to two things at a time. And that's if they're paying attention to your song the whole time, which in a lot of cases, and like seeing my friends listen to songs that I play for them, or like other songs, mine or others, it's like, usually, your friend's on their phone or something like that. So you really have to catch them quick and hold them. And so part of the idea here was, I know I like that melody and I want people to pay attention to that, but I want something to support it. So that's why I added that other kind of lower sound, which I'll solo out so you can hear it on its own. So that's just following like the chord progression basically. And so in order to keep things interesting and spicy, I still want people to be paying attention to that lead sound. And if they want to pay attention to other stuff, they'll be able to pay attention to the bass sound as you hear that come in. But I wanted people to start this and know, oh, it's that song by, Hey Nate. So then this lead sound kind of comes in as it builds. I'll play it a little up so you can. So that sounds pretty cool. And that's definitely the focus. The drums I made kind of go wild just because I wanted it to really feel like there was like not like a drummer back there, but like there's a lot of action, but there's so much going on that it all feels nice together, kind of. Because the melody is cool, but the drums are what make it feel like it's moving. What makes it feel like you're just kind of gonna do one of these, You're just kind of chilling there, bopping, bobbing your head. Anybody can get this, right? You can even hear those off kicks I threw in just to have fun with it. So, but I didn't want people to pay attention to the kick. I wanted them to the drums. I really wanted them just to feel it. So with those in this layer, it's just this. And with the kick there, I basically was like, a lot of people use snares. What if you used a kick to give that same feel? And then I just took out some of the low end and distorted it a bit to give it a little bit more high end. But I liked how it sounded, so I might do that more often. But I really, for a long time, I was producing with just following the chord line with the bass. And that's cool, but it's kind of boring, especially, and originally I had it even following the main line, and I was like, nah. So what I did was, I have one sound, which is just a sub, which I'm sorry, the naming is horrible, but the other sound is sort of a high end thing, and you can see already that the MIDI is different. But if you notice, the MIDI here for the lead sound, I actually made the same as this. And that's because I really like this melody and I wanted it to play louder as the build comes in, so the song stays more exciting and just doesn't feel like it's so repetitive. But here, I'll play the bass and you'll hear as it comes in that the lower end, or the high end, is ramping into this part of the verse. And I did that so that there is a little bit of feeling like something is changing and evolving while someone's listening to it, so that their ear doesn't get bored with it so quickly. Also, if you're listening to this part just like off of your phone, you probably won't necessarily hear the sub, so put in some headphones or something if you can. And they'll build here. And like the thing I would like to point out with like counter melodies and stuff like that is that they feel nice together, right? And honestly, I don't have an exact science for how to do that or how to tell you to do that, except for trying a bunch of stuff. I don't know if you can see here, but I did set up my piano over on the side, and I use an Ableton push to kind of map out notes. And I just try to, like, if I set a melody, I'll just play stuff along until I start to get a couple notes that sound good together. I'll put it in there, and then I just slowly build out. And I really try to take my time because I really want it to feel like it's meant to be like that. Sometimes if you're rushing through things, you will accept subpar options, which is something that when I look back on a lot of my older projects and I was trying to work really fast, that was something I would do. For this one, I took a little bit more time. Obviously, it's a very simple melody. I understand that, but I did take time to try to make them feel good together. Then what I did was I wanted to transition to that lead sound, because I think this lead sound is like a classic, it feels very classic trap to me. But I thought the bass sound was important, and I wanted people to pay attention to it more as it comes into the build. So it's kind of like, oh, this sound is even more accentuated. Oh, and it's building to something, and then the drop doesn't even have it. So it's kind of like, oh, you think it's kind of going to be this, and then it's something else, which that kind of surprise is something that I enjoy as well. So here's the transition, and then kind of into the build a little bit. Sorry, I'll play it here so you can hear the difference in the sound. Sorry for the CPU error. It's a pretty intensive file, but it kind of just goes into this. I feel like I enjoy when producers give me, or writers give me, something that I'm not necessarily expecting, whereas like in that build you'd probably expect to hear that sound kind of hit in the drop. So I wanted to change it up, and that's why I also have a second build here, because it's almost like, it's like, oh, I transitioned to something new, and then we want to build that up and then drop that again. But not only do we drop that again, we bump up the tempo with sort of the like speed house stuff. And the reason I switched up those two drops, one, I just like that kind of feel, you know, but at this tempo, I'm usually more okay with stuff like that, because I don't really want it to just be up the whole time, because usually if you're playing stuff that's at like 146 to 150, or like, what is that, 73, no, yeah, 73 to 75-ish BPM, you kind of can get halftime and speed stuff, but Moolah by Eliminate is a good example of a song that kind of does some of that stuff. But I didn't want it to be that high tempo the whole time. I wanted it to sort of resolve itself back into that trap feel a bit. So that's kind of why that's there. And you can kind of tell in the second drop, the focus mostly now becomes the drop sound and then the drums. It's pretty much exactly the same drums as before, just with faster stuff. But I feel like if you're listening to the song, you pay more attention to the drums in the drop than you do in the verse. And that's purposeful. The rest of the song is relatively pretty simple. It's pretty much, it's honestly kind of the same thing with just some small minor changes depending on the sounds in the second drop. Maybe it's a little longer and stuff like that too, but I really wanted to keep it simple. But coming out of the drop and kind of coming into this, it took me a while to kind of figure out what was going on with it, which melody I wanted to have. And so you'll hear here, you'll hear here, here, here. One thing I used to do in a lot of songs was I would almost reset the vibe completely at the beginning, in like halfway through the song. And so I try to do that not as often as I can. And so I was really trying to play with making this feel like it was drop, it was lit, it was people were having a good time. And then it's almost like I grab them in their peak and hold them there for a second. And that's what I feel like happens at this point. And they're kind of like, and so it's like, it's still fun and exciting, and it's not a drop, but it feels like it's hitting in the way it is. And so in order to think about this and some of these ideas maybe in your own project that's not related to this, I would definitely say, one, try to think about yourself in the environment you're listening to this song in. What would feel good to you in that space, right? If I'm at a live show, I would want something to surprise me in the drop, and I would want the energy to keep flowing and feel nice throughout the song, as well as out of the drops and into the next parts. And some of the other stuff I'm working on that I'm really excited to show starting next week, I really made a point to make sure the energy, once the energy was set at the drop, you never really lost that energy anymore. It maybe might go down a little bit so that it could get up again, but you never really lost it. And I think especially with songs that people want to dance to and stuff like that, you don't really want to stop dancing when you hear a song, unless it's like a bridge section where maybe someone needs a break. But so again, well, not again, let me explain this further. You're working on a song, it feels pretty cool, you don't really know what you're doing. One, if you're making dance songs or things like that and you can't already dance to it in your headphones or something like that, just make a new song. I mean, I feel like I try to make sure I can dance to my song the entire time I'm making it, because it's also more fun that way. I actually got these headphones versus another pair because the other pair, when I would dance with, they would be like, they would move around and they wouldn't be very stable. They were nice, but they just weren't, locked in. So that's really important. But think about the environment you're in. If you were to send this to your friend and they had every opportunity, every environment to listen to this song in, what would be the ideal environment? And I think, sure, I don't think there's one limit. I don't think it has to be in one space. I listen to all of my songs in like so many different spaces. But I do think it's important to think about what the ideal environment is and then start with that one. Start with that as a focus, and then you can sort of branch your mix off to fit other things. When you do that, I feel like it creates a character for the sound a bit. It's almost like, I'm going to do another cooking analogy. It's like you're going to cook for a restaurant. When you make food, what kind of restaurant would that food be served in, right? If I'm going to make a pizza with I don't know, barbecue chicken pizza or something like that, right? I'm not going to go and say, oh yeah, like I'm going to go open like a Szechuan restaurant and serve barbecue chicken pizza. Although interested to see how they would do pizza. Would I be? I don't know. Not the point. But you know what I mean, right? You wouldn't do like something like that. Like you don't go to one restaurant to get food that you would expect at a different restaurant. And so I think that's the same way with music. It also allows you to craft things a bit differently. I've actually been working in a reverse facet to this song where it's like, oh, I'm making music that's not for the club. So I'm going to mix my drums differently to do things like that. And it feels so much better because it feels more like a song in some of those ways. Because in this, you need your song to be able to comparable to another song. Someone may want to mix out of my song right here. But because of the way that song cuts there, they could cut into something else there and it would still feel pretty good. And I tested that on some other songs. That's why I feel confident saying that. So overall, the takeaways from this are: one, make sure you know what you want people to be focusing on and make those stand out in your mix. Carve pathways in EQs and other instruments to save room for those sounds. A way to do that, and I'll show you right now, is let's say I'm looking at my drums, and this is just an example, but oh wait, my clap actually has some EQ low. Whatever. Let's say I'm looking at, let's pretend this isn't my clap. Let's pretend this is a bass line or something like that. And I know by looking at this sound that it's hitting in like this area really well, this like 1K, just for example. Well then, and it's over what the kind of the peak frequency is when you look at the frequency span. So theoretically, if I have a sound that's combating it in the same area that's less prominent, I'm going to reduce it a bit in that range so that the other sound can stand out more. Now, this sound is still going to be filling space all the way around it and everything. It's just going to give it it's going to save some space rather than trying to make it louder and adding too much to that section. It's going to make it a little bit clearer. So one, think about the space you're in. Two, really try to pay attention to the two main things people are focusing on and try to make one more important than the other. Obviously, whatever the lead melody is, I think should be the most important. But if you even like, let's say you take a song you like and you throw it on the ground, right? And you're listening to it from kind of farther away, the volume's a little low, or you just have your headphones or something like that. What things do you hear? If you listen to a lot of hip hop and stuff like that, in my opinion, anyway, you'll hear a lot of like hi-hats and some of those sounds, which, and anyway, the purpose of throwing it is so that you're not hearing like the whole mix. You're only hearing like the quote loudest things or the things that stand out the most. And so using that as a reference, you can kind of determine whether or not the things you're using are sticking out in the way you want them to. Because you never know how someone's going to listen to your song. But you can do the best you can to give them the best opportunity in as many environments as you can, which is essentially what mixing is. And to differentiate that from what I was saying before, this is just a testing thing to see if your sounds are hitting the way you want to. And then the last thing is kind of when you're thinking about the space, think about the things that you would want when you're there. Don't write a song that you think some other dude would want somewhere, or some other girl or some person would want somewhere else. Think about you. What would be dope for you to hear? You're having a good time in the club, or doing whatever, or in your room, and it's like, oh my god, this like drop is like completely different from the song. That is always exciting to me. And so when I take my opinion on that and put it into my song, that makes it unique to me. Not saying the idea is unique, because obviously a lot of people do this, but it's like that's something that I know I really like. So I'm taking that and then I'm going to add it to my repertoire of all these different things that I've brought together and I like. And for those that are wondering, how do I make my sound? What's that thing? That's essentially how you do it. And over time, that stuff sort of collects and you get better and better at picking similar things and crafting a taste. I don't think I necessarily make stuff that sounds that similar right now, but I definitely know I'm getting closer because I'm starting to do more things more often. So that's pretty much how that goes as far as, kind of thinking about those things. Again, I want to help you guys. I want to be a resource. I'm always happy to help. I'd love to make videos like this that are more specific to things that people need or people want in their projects. I'd also be happy to dive into other people's projects and kind of look at things. So please let me know. Obviously, some of this stuff can be a little complex, and I do a bunch of other stuff other than the stuff I was saying. So if you're trying to do things and you're like, this doesn't make sense, or it doesn't sound the right way, or it doesn't feel the way I want it to feel, all that stuff is is fixable. All that stuff has a solution, which is an amazing part of music and everything, is that you can always sort of get to where you want to go. It just kind of takes you a while to get there, and sometimes having someone to help you or show you some things that they use can be really helpful to finalize that point. So with that, I'm going to send it back to Podcast Nate to finish this episode. Well, thank you, producer Nate. Well, thank you guys for watching. Again, please like and subscribe. It definitely helps. Once I get to 100 or so, again, I want to start doing drops or things like that to give you guys things for being involved, like drum packs or sample file or project files, so you can work on these projects with me. I also want to start making videos that might help kind of more specific things, or kind of might more look towards different angles. So please give me recommendations if there's things that you guys think other people don't talk about that you want to learn, or want something to be explained, or for me to dive into something a little bit more clearly. So please let me know. I also am really excited about the songs that I have coming out this next 2 weeks. They're definitely a lot more of the stuff that I hear in my head. So I would really appreciate it if you guys had the ability to check those out and share those along. So with that, enjoy your weekend, stay safe, and